Who do we got on King Kong versus Godzilla? The Battle of the Titans is this week. We get that HBO Max. So
I forgot
I'm
this
taking
was coming
bets.
out.
I'm taking bets. Who's going to take it down? Will it be Kong or will it be Godzilla?
What the hell are we talking about?
I gotta go Zilla.
All right. Can you expound on that a little bit?
I mean, I know that they are supposed to be good, like, foes, and like pretty evenly matched. But in my mind, like, Godzilla beats any other, like, almost any other, like, sentient being. Like, I don't like
any sentient being.
I mean, maybe that's an overreach. I didn't think about like all of the potential consequences, but like in their universe, we're not going to get into Marvel and DC.
I was going to say, like,
it sounds exactly like that's what we're doing.
Yeah, what do you think would happen if like Steppenwolf and Godzilla got in a fight?
Well, but they don't exist in the same universe. Like, I always think about people within their universe, like who is the strongest in not overall, because then we have to like cross-pollinate all of these like rules and who has what abilities and blah blah, right? But like in the Godzilla universe, I think Godzilla is at the top.
I don't think that King Kong is technically in the Godzilla universe though, right? Like they cross the universes. I feel like Steppenwolf could easily fight Godzilla. Also, DC, they're always doing like different dimensions and like going into weird other galaxies and stuff. So I feel like there's a pretty good chance that Steppenwolf could fight Godzilla. And
I drew a picture of Godzilla's butt.
Thank you.
Hell yeah.
Thank you.
Dude, that is a great
I'm just
picture.
taking notes.
Thank you for your consistent contributions, Dave. We really appreciate them.
This is why you have me on the show.
Absolutely.
I honestly, my understanding is that the movie ends with a makeout session between the two. As you look at the poster, and it is obviously bisexual lighting.
Okay. I didn't know there was such a thing.
What do you think the sexual dynamic between King Kong and Godzilla would be like?
Maybe they're both switches. It's my read.
Yeah, I mean,
you asked.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good read, I think. What do you think, Flo? Flo?
I don't know.
Oh,
I'm
suddenly
taking notes here.
the person who knows all things about all these universes can't make an opinion.
I don't
on this.
know all things about all the universes. I just don't usually sexualize them. Like, this is like, this is just, I'm out of my depth here. I'm not.
Do you know what bisexual lighting is in the cinematic world?
I don't.
It's like when there's a bisexual character, they tend to have this lighting that is like both blue and pink and purple.
Okay.
Right?
I've never heard of this before.
Yeah,
it's a thing. Google it.
Bisexual cinematic lighting.
Yes. And then on the poster for this film, it is obviously bisexual lighting.
This is a whole different opener all of a sudden as we all pause to Google.
Yeah. Bisexual
Cinematic
lighting is the simultaneous use of pink, purple, and blue lighting to represent bisexual characters. It has been
hot
used
damn,
in
it's
nightclubs
right
as well
there.
as in studio lighting for film and television. So have you seen the poster for Godzilla? And
I believe now that it probably has blues and pinks and purples.
Yeah, I believe so. Or at least this was a thing that was online. So that, if you want my take, that's my take on what will happen.
That is, I wasn't expecting that take. That's a very kind of well thought out take. Yeah, exactly. I didn't either.
I think that what just happened is we all watched Skylar's mind be blown.
Yeah,
like
it blew my mind a little bit.
We watched it happen.
I mean, I'm looking at some of these images and they do look like they could kiss.
I think this might be the feel-good movie of the year. It,
I
it,
think-
it'll.
I think
It's
that
like
you
the
might be
Brokeback
roaring at
Mountain
aggression at
of
each other,
monsters.
but hey,
That's
you
just,
know.
I think that's just to establish the tension between them so that by the time we get to the payoff, like we want it as badly as they do.
Yeah,
Mm,
it's just gonna
okay.
be like you could cut butter in that theater.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. This is a good one to watch at home, I guess.
I guess so.
Yeah, I guess.
With somebody
I
that
guess
you were
so.
weirdly attracted to, but you're not sure. you
With-
know.
Also have some
With the
unresolved
monster
issues
that
with.
you would like to have sex with.
Yeah,
Invite
But
all your
also maybe
monster
yell at
friends
first.
over.
bring your monster friends over who make you question your space on the Kinsey scale, and just see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Well,
That
yeah, I
answers
think,
that.
yeah, we
Time for
nailed
the
that.
show.
Nailed that opener. Let's do the
I
show.
did not. I didn't even know
Alright.
it was a thing. Wow. Okay.
Voices, the things they said, voices, some from those dead, all the voices heard. Voices, things we say, voices, they're in your head, all the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
I do have Scarlet.
And
That's my impression of you doing my voice, Flo.
that's great.
That was good.
I tried. I tried so hard.
Yeah, you did a really good job.
The number of times I listened to that while editing, just like going back. It's Skylar.
And Skylar.
I said me. I'm Shannon. Shannon's
And
here.
Flo.
Yeah, so Full House. Welcome back, Skylar.
Thank you.
First of all, how did it feel to have your first break in the history of the show?
It was great.
Seriously.
It was very good. Yeah, I
10 out of 10.
enjoyed it. I also like had a road trip, so it was a perfect like. It was like I was so happy to wake up and have a new voices episode that I hadn't heard
Aw.
yet to listen to on my road trip.
Wow,
so,
first time
Aw,
ever.
that's the first
Yeah.
time you had no clue what we did. We went rogue.
yeah, yeah.
Love it.
Oh,
That's
It was
I
all
love
right.
it.
It was
I did.
probably the worst episode that we've ever done.
That episode was trash.
but I'm back now, so it's okay. It's
Yeah.
all right.
Did you like log into Zoom at like 8:00? Like, oh shoot, I don't have to do that tonight.
I did not. Not
Okay.
not even kind of.
Not even close.
Okay. All right. Good. Good. I'm glad.
From a tent in Joshua Tree.
And you didn't feel any anxiety about like I'm forgetting to do something, because that happens to me sometimes when I break my habit. It's like I feel off the whole time, like I'm forgetting something.
You know, if I had been here, then maybe, but I wasn't. I was in
Yeah.
a different place. So
That helps.
That
That
was a
does.
very-
Skylar
a
was like
nice place.
actively helping me try to troubleshoot.
Oh yeah,
some
I forgot
voices.
Oh yeah, that's true. He still had to
online.
work.
He worked a little bit.
I can work remotely.
Yeah. Well, we had a lot of fun. We definitely missed you. I stayed up late editing, but like you're right, man. Editing's fun.
Yeah.
I
I
had no
enjoy it.
idea. Well, let's get started on this episode because you know the last one is, as Skylar said, just sucked. So we really gotta knock this one out of the park today. We got a interesting one. Darrell Steinberg, master of crows, friend and foe, has been at it again. He on Saturday released a statement gathering the signatures of everyone on city council, of all these chamber groups, of a bunch of other random people, most of whom I didn't know. I don't know if you went through all the names who signed on to this. But basically saying that this group of activists who call themselves Sactivists were planning to march on city manager Howard Chan's house, and they were standing against it. But before we even get into that, I just want to stop and say, and I want to reframe all of this because we should remember this, that there is blood on Darrell Steinberg's hands for how our city has treated and neglected our unhoused community, how many people have died in the streets. There is blood on the hands of our city council members who have been there for longer than 4 or 5 months, who have had every chance to find ways to serve them, but refuse to. There's blood on the hands of all of these folks for not pushing toward prosecuting the cops who continue to kill and brutalize Black and brown people within our city. There is also blood on the hands of Howard Chan, who city council members keep saying like, well, we have our hands tied. This is his job. So let's all start from that block. So these young folks, these activists, are going out on Sunday night to protest the violence that Howard Chan has let happen for years and years. The same way that has happened with them protesting outside other places. And Darrell Steinberg came out with this press release with all these different, every city council member signed it, all these different chambers, all these other folks saying that they denounce this violence preemptively. That's not even, they haven't even demonstrated outside Chan's house yet. Nobody knows what's going to happen. As it turns out, it's just a perfectly peaceful, normal protest. They preemptively call it violent, hinting that they're domestic terrorists. And then they try and tie it in with this wave of anti-AAPI sentiment, just like bad faith, really disgusting. I didn't think Darrell could get this low. They did that. So that's sort of where we are with this. Should we give some context? Can somebody give some context on like the demonstration outside Darrell's house?
Sure. So at the end of January, there was a special meeting of the city council. I like to remind everyone it was a special meeting for a key purpose, and that the agenda only has to be posted 24 hours in advance. And as we often know about weather forecasts, those are known often days in advance. And so in this case, there was a storm coming to Sacramento, and this special meeting was happening on Tuesday, I believe it was the 26th of January. And on that agenda was not an item to open up the warming centers that had been open the previous night. And so instead of actually taking on the business that the council could have done, which is authorizing the opening of the warming centers, the mayor kind of went on a tantrum at the end of the meeting about how people were going to die tonight. And then 6 people did die that night. And many more were injured that didn't die that night because they weren't sheltered. And so about a week later, there was a protest at Darrell's house about his inaction around housing and homelessness. And in the process, some parts of his landscaping were impacted, were damaged, and it was described as violence. And there was a big uproar about, what happened at his home. And the Sacramento Bee columnist Gil Duran, he's over the editorial board, actually said that it was no different than what happened on January 6th at the nation's capital. I think
Absurd.
we can.
They also he also framed it as being anti-Semitic, which is
Yes.
Right.
very, very similar to exactly what they're doing now, right?
Right. And so, so that was happening. And and that's the context for this. So there has been this ongoing conversation in Sacramento and probably also in other places about whether or not it's appropriate to go to people's homes to protest. Because usually protests happen at the Capitol or at City Hall, but the difference right now is that nobody's there. And in fact, when we were talking about the die-in that was scheduled, a month or so ago, that was at City Hall, one of the, people who works for the city said, yeah, but nobody's going to be there. Kind of like smug, like shrugging, right? Because it doesn't have the same, it's not disruptive. Like protests are often, are designed to draw attention and to be disruptive. And it's not disruptive when nobody's there to hear or see your message, right? And so
if
there's
they're
an
going to
element to
smugly
this.
say good luck, making a difference when none of us are going to be there, fine. Well,
Right.
That's always how
pivot.
like conservatives or like conservative Democrats like a Darrell Steinberg want protests to happen, though, right? Is in ways that are easily ignorable, in ways that do not actually do very much disruption, and that
because they
don't actually present any kind of like ill effect to the status quo one way or another, right? I mean, that's how they would prefer that everybody protested everything, because it's easy to ignore that way.
Right.
Yeah. And they would also prefer, and this is, I think, where everybody kind of gets up in arms, is that, there is a comfort to protests that are described as peaceful, right? And everybody, is anti-violent until they're not, right? And so it's really interesting where those like lines are drawn. I often ask people, so, should the U.S. not have gotten involved in World War II? Should we not, should the Civil War not have been fought? Do you think that slave revolts were immoral? And usually the answers to that are, well, no, of course I think we should have. And I'm like, so where is the line for when violence is okay and when it's not? Because you're clearly not a pacifist, right? You're clearly okay with some violence. So how do you decide? Because unless you're telling me that you honestly think that the Nazis should have killed more people and that slavery should still go on, both of those were ended by violence. And so you're okay with some level of violence. And so the question is, who are you comfortable with making the decision that violence is okay? Why are you comfortable with it? And why is their decision any more moral than anybody else's? And I think those are key questions that we just have to raise for ourselves. And that's not me, doing a call to arms for people to be violent. But I think if we're going to be ideologically honest, we can't act as if we're pacifists when it's convenient. And then on the other hand, turn around and, be okay with violence when that's also convenient for us. We need to be clear about where we stand.
Right. And again, under Howard Chan, under Darrell Steinberg, under our veteran city council members, there has been repeated violence against communities of color and against our unhoused neighbors. And what folks going on these demonstrations are saying is that's enough. That's enough. Stop it. That
also, these
violence.
things haven't been violent. That's the
Right.
other side of it, is that violence hasn't like if we're talking about violence, it's been completely one-sided, like
Totally.
the city and the cops waging violence against peaceful protesters.
Well,
It's not
here's
the
where
other
those
way
split.
around.
Here's where those split hairs, though, Skylar, is that the definition of violence they're going to use is like the dictionary definition, which is intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something. So they are describing injuring landscaping as violence.
Right.
I don't view that as violence unless, I don't view that as violence. I view that as maybe intimidation. I view that as property damage. But I view violence as when people are harmed. And I in this way align often with our legal code, which is oddly in that like there are violent crimes, right, and there are non-violent crimes. And usually the ones involving people are viewed as violent, and the ones that are right or brandishing or doing something that shows that you're about to harm someone, right?
Right.
Is what is like property crimes are viewed in an entirely different class. So there is precedent for not viewing violence this broadly, but when it's convenient, our the SAGB and others take the lane of this is all violence, and they're suddenly unable to distinguish between insurrectionists hanging nooses and wearing 6 million wasn't enough shirts and and killing people, and people protesting the deaths of the deaths of people who live in our community and the inaction of our and landscaping being damaged. Like those are the same, right? And I'm just like, You can't be operating in good faith and tell me that you can't see a difference.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think, I think as is, you know, the famous episode we've had, Darrell is obviously operating in bad faith. Gil Duran is obviously operating in bad faith when he's, you know, claiming that
He loves this shit. As soon as I saw this kicking up, I was like, oh, Gil is about to go nuts. Like countdown to when Gil goes to DEFCON 7 here.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too, you know, watching this small man, this guy who has the platform of the SACB's editorial board be so petty and so childish to fight, to spar on Twitter with these young anarchist activists. Like it's absurd to watch him be like this. And honestly, he's doing them a favor. He's giving them a platform, and now more and more of us know who this activists are. So good job, Gil. I mean, you're making them more powerful.
Yeah. So I don't understand this notion that like the SACB and, you know, the mayor and city council have that like, oh, like coming to our homes is like this unconscionable, like crossing of a line somehow. Like, I don't understand like this. I don't understand this in the same way that I don't get how like people get, you know, there's like every now and then a video comes out of like activists finding like Mitch McConnell eating dinner with his wife in a restaurant or somewhere, and they like yell at him and shout at him and he has to leave the restaurant or wherever. And people are like, look, that's just not how politics are done. You know, like there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way, and there's civility here and there's decorum, and when you go outside of that, it's really bad. But like, to me, it's like, if you have a job like the mayor of Sacramento or the city manager of Sacramento or the police chief of Sacramento, and you use that position to like govern aggressively in a way that makes life more unlivable for the people you're supposed to be representing, that makes it so that people can't afford to live in their neighborhoods, makes it so that people can't afford housing, can't afford food, six this like violent force of cops on people, and now people are, you know, like we have people who literally die in the streets, right? And that's due to leadership. That's due to decisions, conscious decisions being made by guys like Steinberg and Howard Chan. And so this notion that you get to do that with like basically like impunity, and then you just get to go home and like sleep in your bed and like have a good night's rest or whatever, like that's hubris on a scale that like kind of blows my mind. Like, absolutely not. You don't get to do that. Like, you should, like, if you go into a position where you are like leading a government which is supposed to be representing the interests of all the people who live within the confines of whatever that structure is, and you do it to lower the quality of everybody's life and in some cases kill them, you should always be worried that people are going to find out where you live and fuck your shit up, right? And again, to you know, compare this to something that happened nationally, right? Like, you guys all saw that thing recently with the minimum wage vote, when Kristen Sinema comes walking down the floor of Congress and does that little like move where she like puts the thumbs down or whatever. Like, that's frustrating, of course, on a million different levels. But like for one, that's frustrating because there's no consequences. She's not afraid of anything. Like, with that move, she cast like millions of people into like continued poverty, right? And like into this like continued like version of American life that is like,
and deaths will result because of
exactly. And she
vote.
does it with like a little dance move, you know, and that to me, like, that makes me furious. It's like, dude, you should be terrified for the rest of your life. You should never be able to leave your house if that is how you're going to use your position to govern. And like, to me, the same thing sort of applies with the mayor and the city manager of this city. It's like, no, you don't get to do that. You do not get to make the decisions that you have made over and over and over and over and over again to the detriment of everybody who lives here, and then go home to your fucking little McMansion in Natomas and like have a good night's rest. I'm sorry. You don't get to do that. You do not have the right to that. Absolutely not.
The veil is being lifted, and not just on a national level. I think here locally too, where, you know, back in the day, you know, the big lie was like, oh, you can't get by, you're gonna die in the streets, or you can't feed your kids in your house. That's your fault. You didn't pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Now people are realizing this is systemic. We are the richest country in the world. There is no reason we should have this level of poverty, of homelessness, of any of these things. And it is tied directly to our policymakers. So our policymakers, like Darrell and all the others in city council, and those at the county level, and those at our state level, and our city manager, right? And our county, executive. The decisions they make result in your suffering because they are answering to the interests of capital, who paid their campaigns and continue to pay them. So no, we don't go away. You don't feel comfort ever again until you start ameliorating the pain of the people. Can we talk about this time around what happened, where they tried to tie this activists' demonstration in with this anti-AAPI animus that we've seen in the country as a direct result of Trumpism, really? They're trying to tie the left in with that. Can we talk about that? And who wants to go first?
I mean, so of course they are, right? Like it's like a both sides thing, right? Like they love to do the both sides thing where it's like, oh, like there's the fascists and they're bad, and then there's the anti-fascists and they're just like the fascists, except they're on the left, and you know, it's all the same bad stuff. And it's just like,
can we explain what he did? So like what Darrell did, he basically Darrell personally, as he does in moments like this, he reaches out to all the community leaders in all the different corners and says, I'm going to write this little, this statement against like violence and blah, blah, blah. Will you sign on with me? And he gets all these people to sign on with him. And in his piece, trying to paint this activist who haven't even gone and protested yet, he tries to paint them as violent when they haven't even demonstrated yet. And then B, he tries to tie his calling them violent in with this anti-AAPI rhetoric. And like in this piece, he's basically saying, I don't know, like you were just saying, Skylar, and sorry for cutting you off. I just wanted to like really drive home what he was doing. He's trying to tie in this horrible thing that we all agree is horrible. Right. And that the leftists in particular are fighting against. He's trying to claim leftists are a part of this fucking problem.
And let me also tie in the thing that I'm not sure if the person wants to be named, but someone brought up on social media that I thought was really a keen observation. And this person is part of the API community and said, I resent the fact that the car protest on Saturday is being once again weaponized against other people who are also protesting, right? So there was a Stop Asian Hate car protest on Saturday that took place in the morning. It was from like 9 to 11. It was mostly down Stockton Boulevard. And it was being presented as, the right way to protest, right? And so this person who is part of the API community was just like, how
you,
dare
Darrell.
you once again try to model minority, you know, this whole situation. That's a tool of oppression and a tool of white supremacy, and it's not cool. Don't take one demonstration and then turn to other people and say this is the right way to do it.
Right. And that's not, I want to like point out, and I assume that we all feel this way. That's not to knock something like the car demonstration.
No, not at all.
That's you know, that's against
Not at all.
Asian violence. I think like that's a great
It was
thing to do
beautiful.
as well. Yeah, that's
Right.
that's a great action to take part in. But
Right.
it's not the only way to go about it. Right.
Right.
Well, the letter that Steinberg put out like really centers like that action, right? And then at the end, it ends with, God, he's such a piece of shit. He says these protesters can't be allowed to appropriate righteous causes like helping those experiencing homelessness or protecting and valuing Black lives. They can't be allowed to make so much noise that they drown out the voices of love and unity that were crying in the streets of South Sacramento on Saturday. We will not be intimidated. We are Sacramento. This
What an
letter,
absolute worm. Oh my
the
God.
letter is disgusting. Like the letter is damning.
It's projecting.
Right? It's
He's
projecting, and
appropriating.
he's appropriating exactly like he's appropriating what happened at that demonstration. And I suspect that everyone that signed on to that letter didn't have much choice but to sign on to the letter, or else what, right? Like
Right.
what happens if people don't sign on to that? You're on the mayor's poopy list, because we're not allowed to curse on this episode.
Yeah, you definitely didn't
We're already
swear
blowing
like
that
30
one.
seconds ago.
Right. Right.
Oh, did I just swear?
Yeah, you did.
We all
I
have
haven't
already.
said anything the
except
whole
for
show,
Flo.
and then the first thing I do is a swear. Cool.
I just pretend I'm at work, and then suddenly the slurs don't come out.
Oh, I
That's
swear
why
a lot at
can't
work.
do it.
I'm usually pretty good. I knew I would be very angry this episode with
Yeah.
what they're doing. What these folks in power, it's just absolutely vile. It's vile.
Yeah.
It's super disingenuous, and it's really harmful too to like weaponize identity in the way that it's being
Yes.
done, right? Because it doesn't, like, this is a community of people who take those things very seriously, right? Like the left, it's important. Like racial equity is important to the left. When you weaponize it, when you like take something that like, it's like, to me it feels like a similar kind of tack to when it was impossible to criticize Hillary Clinton without being a misogynist, right? And it just like
Right.
is a way to shut down the argument, because you're dealing with a group of people who are like sensitive to misogyny and are sensitive to racial animus, and so that if you bring that out and you're like, oh well, I think that this is really insensitive towards like a specific group of people or whatever, that is going to be an effective weapon to like stifle the discourse around what they're trying to do. But it also like it muddies the waters around it in a way that those waters should not be muddied. It is like an irresponsible use and weaponization of those kinds of concepts. And I think ultimately it's super harmful to like bring in something like obviously, like, I don't know, are the Flyers like very aggressive? Yeah, sure, they are, like for sure. But like there's absolutely no reason to look at that and be like, oh my God, this is like anti-Asian rhetoric. And like if you're doing a good faith read on it, which clearly, Darrell and guys like Gil are not doing good faith reads on those things.
They did mention that the folks who did share it said, we didn't make it. But yes, we did share it. It also, this exact same font was used for demonstrations outside Darrell's house, as well as outside Chief Hahn's house, I believe. There is some particular sensitivity to the moment
Right.
which I
Yeah.
believe the demonstrators recognized when they wrote this after the fact. Just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, yeah, we should have thought about this."
I was gonna say I actually wanted to lift up, and I'm assuming we might have some time to read the statement from Anti-Police Terror Project Sacramento, because I thought their statement struck the right tone, and I was like, they're not our elected officials, and yet they came out with a statement that made a lot more sense to me. And essentially what they said was, it has come to the community's attention that there's been a flyer circulating with an image of Sacramento City Manager Howard Chan. The creators of the flyer and their intentions were to make a political statement bringing attention to Mr. Chan's record while in his current position. Since accepting his position in February 2017, he has never once fired a police officer for misconduct, no matter how egregious. Though we did not create the flyers or organize the events, we have had several conversations with the creators about its impact upon fellow community members. We do acknowledge that while their graphics were in poor taste, the intent for their flyer was not to spread anti-Asian sentiment. We also acknowledge the harm felt by some of our fellow community members who identify as Asian and Pacific Islander, who were triggered by the flyer given the recent racial violence against their community. We respect a diversity of tactics, and we will not tell independent activists how to move, but we will encourage all activists to do better in communicating with their allies that they hope will support them and the community members they seek to serve. We recognize past harms done and the need to deepen solidarity within and between all communities of color against the white supremacist system. We also recognize why community members have decided to exercise their right to peacefully protest in the first place. Howard Chan is a city official who has been complicit in police murders of Black, brown, and Asian bodies. Howard could have and should have done more to hold Sacramento police officers accountable for the murders of Stephon Clark and Darrell Richards, which community members have demanded from him since 2018. Nevertheless, the city of Sacramento and Sacramento police are attempting to tokenize Howard Chan's racial identity and exploit the recent attack against the API community in order to justify an extreme police response against specific activists that will only increase violence and further terrorize our communities. This morning, Sacramento City Council released a statement falsely casting one activist group as hateful, intimidating, and violent. They even reached far enough to say that the group's agenda is ill-defined. The agenda, according to the flyer, which does not identify any single group at all, is to hold city leadership accountable for the deaths of people by Sacramento City Police. This statement is a dangerous repression of free speech and activism. We will not sit idly by as city officials target Sacramentans for exercising their right to protest. We will not be told by the city council when or where free speech or protest is acceptable. We will not be silent while the city exploits our collective traumas in an attempt to pit activists and communities of color against each other. We do not accept any false equivalence between the destruction of property and the physical violence perpetrated against our bodies. We will not be divided by the ideologies of white supremacy, nor the individuals or systems that uphold it. We are committed to standing in solidarity with the API community and all oppressed people against any individuals or systems that harm us.
I think the Anti-Police Terror Project, I don't think anyone could have said it better. I think that's perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah, and it's, I think once again we find a situation where the community does it better, more intentionally, with more passion and dedication to flourishing and accountability and maintaining relationships than even our elected officials do, because these people in positions of power made decisions to uphold systems of oppression by signing on to that letter. And the mayor made a decision to uphold basic tenets of white supremacy by co-opting the work of the AAPI community and using that to vilify the left's consistent dedication for justice, to work toward justice. And
It's just disgusting.
It's gross. And I don't know. I mean, I really like one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot today after, because we know what happened at this protest.
Were you asking or were you gonna say?
No, I was gonna say I was asking and then I was gonna answer the
It
question.
was rhetorical. Well, then you go ahead.
What ended up happening was that 20-ish people, according to Scott Rod, is that his last name? With
Cap Radio.
About 20 people showed up out in front of Howard Chan's home, and
honestly 20 brave people after like you've been described as
Truly.
domestic terrorists by like local government and law enforcement.
Yeah, I think we should drive that home as you say, how the night went, Shannon. Darrell's rhetoric was opening up. It was basically saying that he sanctioned state violence against these people no matter what. He was already calling them violent, even though there's no reason to think that they were going to act violently. And so our police force is now referring to these young folks as domestic terrorists. This is on you, Darrell. This is on you, Chief Hahn. You are doing this, and you are creating such a dangerous environment for young people who are out there making their fucking I did a swear now, who are making their voices heard. This is important. Young people should be able to go out and make their voices heard.
Yeah, I mean, like telling people that they are not allowed to use the last thing they have to telling people that you can't protest acts of violence or injustice is like that's the last tool of the people, right? And what our mayor and council effectively did was say that is like, sorry, but you don't get to do that because that's violence. So these 20 folks showed up, and from the videos they stood out on the street and they chanted, and they were there for about an hour and then they took off. But they were met with an intense police presence. There were about 30 cops in riot gear with
I read 50.
Oh, 50. Excellent. So there was
Scott had written 30 on the thread, maybe.
Scott had written 30 on the thread, yeah. So there's at least one, maybe two officers per protester, multiple unmarked vehicles, cop cars, helicopters. Like they created a perimeter with their bikes, the police officers did, around Howard Chan's home, which at the end of it they look ridiculous.
Yes.
As these 20 folks are sitting, like some standing, some sitting in the street, just chanting, just holding signs, making their presence known. Like, let's also remember that this is a protest that was taking place off the grid on a Sunday night. Like,
off the grid. The grid is the central city of Sacramento.
Right. I feel that's right. More people than just Sacramentans listen to us. More people than are off of the out of city center. You had to drive to get there. We're in the middle of a pandemic. People potentially don't have transportation or are not vaccinated and don't want to get in the car with other folks. Like there's any number of things that would limit the number of people going to a protest like this. And yet they still flew up 2 helicopters and brought out 30 plus police officers. I hope that that the entire council was following all of the social media last night and felt real dumb.
Yeah.
Like watching just exactly what went down.
I mean, and how much money do you think it cost the city to do all that, right? To fly the 2 helicopters around, pay a bunch of overtime for the cops, like blah, 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 blah. What if we like we're putting that money into like getting people food and housing who need it, you know, instead, and like people weren't dying in the streets so that there aren't a bunch of people who are like bringing their torches and pitchforks to the houses of like their local, you know, city leadership. What if there was a better way to use that money rather than to just dump it on a bunch of stormtroopers who are like LARPing around in Howard Chan's neighborhood, costing the city like who knows how much money?
Well, funny you should mention it, because on Wednesday the funding for the warming centers runs out, and so those are closing, but there's plenty of money
Yeah.
For that.
all those cops.
So this is going to be my frustration, right? Is that the night? It's funny how bureaucracy only gets held up when we need to do right. So the night of the storm, you know, more than 5 city council members reached out to Howard and said, open up the warming centers, right? More than 5. And yet I couldn't, my hands are tied, but they somehow can mobilize this police presence and get a letter out on a Sunday or a Saturday or whenever this came out over the weekend. They can do all of that easy peasy with no issue and waste more money than it would have cost to just open up the damn warming center. That's what's gonna make me angry, right?
I'd be willing to bet that what was the total to operate a warming center for the night was like, it was like in the hundreds of dollars, right? I can't remember.
It's not that expensive, no.
It's not
especially
that
because
much.
most of the time it's volunteers that are it's not that expensive.
It's volunteers manning it. It's also volunteers bringing in food and water.
Right.
Because
it's also volunteers bringing in blankets and sleeping bags and everything that is necessary to keep people comfortable and treat humans like humans.
But they put all that money to making like 30 to 50 cops, 20 to 50 sit outside Howard Chan's house and look at these demonstrators. Like, I can't
believe you just said that and did not refer to 30 to 50 feral hogs.
Oh my
Just
God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, come on, man.
Absolutely 30
let's
to 50 feral hogs.
Thank you.
In a matter of minutes, lining up outside Howard Chan's house. This one young anarchist, I'm not an anarchist, but I will say that this praxis by this young anarchist single-handedly showed us the absurdity of the moment.
Right.
And so, Gil, keep trying to spar with these kids on Twitter because you're proving their point. And City Council, Darrell, use your personal blog to attack these young folks because you're proving their point. Keep doing this. Keep wasting our money. Keep wasting the money that could go to helping people, to giving them shelter, to giving them housing, to do this absurd stuff that just shows what the coercive arm of the state is really about, which is protecting the status quo, which means continuing to harm people who are being hurt.
Right.
Yep.
Do you think that there's at any point, like somebody like Howard Chan or Darrell Steinberg, when the protesters are like coming to their house, have any sort of like moment of like reflection where they're like, could I be doing things differently in a way that would make it so people didn't want to come to my house and scream at me?
The Principal Skinner moment. Maybe I am out of touch.
Yeah.
No.
Do you think that they ever have like that moment of reflection where they're like, am I just doing like the wrong thing in a really major way? Like, do I bear some responsibility in how angry all these people are with me?
When directly asked by Teresa Clift, who was reporting with the Sacramento Bee just after the January 26th weather or storm that killed 6 people, whether or not Howard Chan would make the same decision that he made by not opening the warming center doors on that night when we had 60, 70 mile per hour winds ripping through our city, he said, maybe. Like,
Right?
This guy doesn't
what?
deserve demonstrators outside his home every week. Like,
Right?
oh my God.
Like, why did this
Disgusting.
guy thinks that he could like say that and then just like
Vile.
go home and have like a relaxing night's sleep in his
Yep.
like in his little McMansion? Like, absolutely not.
And
Absolutely
let's not forget-
You do not deserve that comfort. You do not deserve that safety.
And let's not forget that the mayor has over and over and over again refused to condemn the actions of Sac PD when they kill Black and brown folks in our community. Like, these are not people who go home at night and think, what am I doing wrong? These are people who feel like they're doing everything right, and that we are all doing that the conversations that we are having are so violent and so like out there, right? Because to demand change on the level that like even this show upholds is something that is completely, they're just like, nope, there's no room for this discourse. Like, there's absolutely no lean into community accountability. There's no lean into listening sessions or like the power of mutual aid work or actual equity or actual transparency. None of that stuff is of any value to these kinds of folks, except when it comes to making dollars and cents, when they can write it on a piece of paper and then pay a woman of color, very likely, to write a grant report on how they actually made shit happen. Like, no,
And
they're terrible people.
you know what I hadn't connected until actually I went back to look just now is that the very same day, okay, that the storm happened was also the day of the budget and audit committee meeting for the city.
Right.
And
Where they
at
talk
that
about the
committee
surplus.
meeting, like, because the timeline, the further away you get from it, the more you like, all of this happened on the same day. So they were talking about the surplus this same day. And despite the fact that an Office of Community Response that everybody supposedly voted for unanimously in July to be able to divert funding away from the police department has had zero funding at this point, okay? The city manager's budget proposal for the $40 million in excess revenue was to hire 10 new police officers.
The same ones that would stand outside of his house only months later to protect him.
Well,
from...
and not
10
only
new
that,
feral hogs.
the same
Ding, ding,
same
ding.
police officers who have been like who spent all summer brutalizing people at the peaceful protest that our
Ding,
city
ding, ding.
leadership like claims that they want, right? Like they're like, oh no, go protest peacefully. Dude, it was just last summer when people were assaulted, arrested, beaten, pepper sprayed, in some cases mutilated.
There was
While
a member
protesting
of the-
peacefully.
there was a member of the API community whose
Right.
eye was injured. They were in the hospital for many
They got like
days
shot in the head with
because
a
they
rubber
got
bullet,
shot in the
right?
head with a projectile shot
multiple
by
things.
SAC
Yes.
PD.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
so
you
when
wanna talk about
Darrell's
violence?
do peaceful protest or whatever, it's like, yeah, no, absolutely not. Like everybody still remembers how that went.
I'm still waiting on my apology from the city of Sacramento, which is the only thing I asked for because I knew it was going to be harder to get them money. All I wanted was for them to say, I'm sorry. I'm still waiting 2 years later for
I watched them
for them
attack
to
you.
apologize.
I watched them physically attack Flo like over and over again.
And I'm waiting 2 years later for an apology. Like literally, that's all I asked for. I said on the record, I don't want any money. I just want an apology.
Violent Sacramento cops. I think we'd be remiss though, and like I actually feel like we should have brought this up earlier. There are two people on city council who have over the few months been speaking truth to power. They've been working toward reimagining public safety, taking money away from the cops and putting it actually towards our communities. But they did sign on to this letter. What are our thoughts there? I'm talking about council members Katie Valenzuela and Mai Vang.
Yeah, I mean, this is tough. Like, I know Katie made a post about it, and I thought that the person who responded to her post did a really great job of breaking down sort of that role, right? Because both of them are new to their role. And, I think taking the APTP approach, right, of being able to say like, look, this image is is clearly a bit tone deaf, but also let's not lose sight, I think is the tone that, and I think the message that, that we would have wanted to have come from them. Unfortunately, it was a message from the entire council. And so that's not what you're going to get from the entire council. And so the question is, do you stay off the letter, right, and then get harangued by Gil Duran and others for condoning violence and blah 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 blah,
Which he will find a way to harangue them one way or another,
no matter what.
one way or the other, absolutely. Yeah, and so on one hand, it's a tough position to be in, and it's disappointing, I'm sure, all around, because it feels like you're signing on to this, this mess. I also feel like, we're putting two people out there to fight every single one of our battles. And that part is really hard. And I think they are fighting. I think that, they do have reservations about how all of this was handled. But we also have to be, honest that they are signed on to that letter. And I think the commenter on Katie's post said, it's different when we as community members, say, I don't like what's happening at that protest, or I don't this, that, and the other, right? But when it comes from institutional power, it comes
You are now
across,
institutional power. Yes.
You are now institutional power. You have to recognize you're no longer a community organizer, and that there are things that when you do them don't come across the same as when you were on the other side of the line. And this is one of them, right? Because it comes across as silencing, a group. It comes across as, not comes across, it is threatening a group when, they're being called essentially terrorists, they're being weaponized against each other. And that is a problem, right? So that's the part I think that's challenging about all of this, is that, here we are once again with two young women of color having all of our, burdens on their back. And certainly they took on this role to be able to be our champion. But also it means that at every, they just get beat down at every single turn, because, if they stand up and fight, they're going to get beat down for that. And if they're just like, whatever, this one, I'm going to try to do my best, but it's not perfect, they're going to get beat down for that. And I'm trying to both be, hold the accountability piece of like, yes, this letter is problematic. And being signed onto it is,
disappointing.
Is disappointing. I also recognize, like, imagine if they hadn't. Yeah. Would they be able to fight? Like, we have a budget coming up in 3. Would they even have time over the next 3 weeks? You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, we know that all guns are pointed at them. And so this is one of those, like, you're trying to make the right decision, I think, in the moment, but it's hard.
Yeah. I mean, I was disappointed. I also think that I think it's really important to be able to create an ecosystem where they feel safe to say, no, you're grandstanding, this is disgusting, and we're not going to sign on to this absurdity. Right. And so part of that includes all of us continuing harangue Gil Duran. Never stop emailing him, go for him. And every email he got after that first round, he kept telling folks, oh, you're the only person who said that. Weird. And yet I got all this support. He's lying. He got all of your emails, and there were many of you. Keep haranguing him. on top of that, we got to create an ecosystem. It's about building solidarity, which I think APTP did beautifully in this moment. It's also about building power, within our community. So like, who can we knock out a city council next to get on there so that they don't all once again have to sign on to Darrell Steinberg's personal blog for his grandstanding. And I think that's really important too. And I know that a lot of listeners are, not electoralists, but like, I do think that that's one of the answers.
Yeah. I think, I know we have to wrap the show, but I think one of the things that I've been considering a lot over the last, we're probably entering the 48th hour of this whole thing at the time that we're recording. And I think that because we can walk and chew gum at the same time, we can uphold two opposing truths at the same time, which is to say that this, Katie and we're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yep.
And the situation would have been rough for them had they not signed on. But also, my take on it is by signing on, there was also harm that was committed. And there has to be space for both of those things. And I think that we certainly have to continue to name and amplify that, especially women of color hold so much of that emotional labor, and are asked to do so much of that really hard work. And those two women of color in particular have had to do a lot since they took their seats. And we can see all the work that they're doing, listen to all of the work that they're doing. And still, I think it was incredibly disappointing to see their name, for me personally, to see both of their names on that letter. And I don't know, I can't quite envision what it would look like to not have them and to not have their names there. But I do think that they have to recognize the harm that was done to the people that have supported them, that they actively vilified by signing the letter.
Absolutely.
I think it would have been better.
Stop.
Yeah, it would have been better to just have their own letter.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm just going to run right into it. Guys, we are Voices River City. We are a place with many beautiful, perfect takes. You can find us at voicesrivercity.com. Our podcast obviously is in every place that a podcast can be found, all the platforms. We are on Facebook, Voices River City, Twitter at Voices River City, same with Instagram at Voices River City. You can get double the episodes every week. So you'll get a Friday episode on top of your Tuesday episode if you become a patron for only $5 a month at patreon.com/voicesrivercity. It's worth it. We care about this stuff. We're really trying to do good work. So please hop on and do that. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Kempa, YOUKNOWKEMPA.
You can follow me at Guillotine for You. That's Guillotine, the number 4, YOU.
I am Shan, N.D. Stevens.
And I am Flojaune, FLOJAUNE.
I'm so sorry for the hard cut, but this is
a big topic.
We
gotta go.
Yeah.
All right. Well then, we have a bunch of complicated feelings about you, and we want you to stay safe.
Stay sane.
Stay healthy.
And stay the bleep away from me.